Good afternoon. We have a really great turnout. Thanks for taking the time to attend our webinar on the proposal for our new national versions of our program for the single family and multifamily sectors. That would be single family new homes version 3.3 and multifamily new construction national version 1.3. This is Dean Gamble speaking. Hopefully you'll continue to hear me throughout the presentation. I'm the technical manager of the Single Family New Homes program. I'll kick things off today, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Rebecca Hudson, to cover the multifamily new construction sector. Let me give you a quick rundown of the agenda, and then we'll dive right in. We'll start off with the Single Family New Homes program, providing an overview of our current program versions, our rationale for developing a new version, and finally, the goals for the new version, along with a specific proposal for National Version 3.3. We'll then repeat that for the multifamily new construction program, ending with a specific proposal for National Version 1.3. After that, we'll recap what we've discussed and let you know how you can provide feedback on the proposals, and we'll end with Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started. The Single Family New Homes program. Note that I'll be using the SFNH abbreviation for our program throughout the presentation. Today we have several different versions of our single family program requirements. We currently have two national versions, National Version 3.1, which delivers at least 10% savings relative to the 2018 IECC. That's the minimum eligible version for certification in most of the states, which are shown in light blue on the map. And we have National Version 3.2, which delivers at least 10% savings relative to the 2021 IECC. That will become the minimum eligible version for certification purposes in states that adopt the 2021 IECC or an equally rigorous code. We currently have an implementation timeline defined for 9 states, shown in the green stripes. And finally, we have regional program versions in a handful of locations. Most regional versions are scheduled to be sunset in 2025. The exceptions are California, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. These regional versions save at least 10% relative to the state code or territory code, and those are shown in dark blue. Now, in this new era of the tax credit, we like to take every opportunity to emphasize that the minimum program version that's eligible for the tax credit can be more stringent than what we're showing here, the minimum version required just for certification. This will not be the only time you hear this disclaimer during today's webinar, as it continues to be a point of confusion for some partners. So that's where we stand today. The reason we're contemplating new versions is that the 2024 edition of the International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC, was published this August, following the typical 3-year cycle. The most substantial change to note in the prescriptive path is a requirement to select at least 2 additional efficiency measures from among 50 or so options that total at least 10 credits. Now, I've shown a small sample of these measures below, but they cover a broad range of strategies. For example, a better enclosure, more efficient heating, cooling, and water heating equipment, more efficient duct systems, reduced air leakage and efficient ventilation, efficient appliances, on-site renewables, and demand-responsive thermostats. So quite a range of choices. Because of this and the other changes made in the 2024 ICC, we needed to evaluate whether our latest national version of the program requirements, National Version 3.2, delivered sufficient savings compared to this new code. So what did we find? Well, what we found is that National Version 3.2 does not, in fact, save at least 10% in all climate zones relative to this new code. As a result, a new version is needed in response to the 2024 IECC. That's why we're here today. Notably, though, the required improvement in 3.3 and version 3.2 will be smaller than the delta between version 3.2 and version 3.1, particularly in some climate zones. Now, we want to note that the Department of Energy has 1 year to publish a determination as to whether this latest edition of code will improve energy efficiency compared to the previous edition, meaning the 2021 IECC. We recognize that DOE has not yet released their determination, and so we'll continue to monitor its status, reassessing our timeline for finalizing this proposal, as well as potentially adjusting our proposed requirements and the effective date of it as warranted. I will note for context that a preliminary analysis from PNNL has indicated that the new code is about 6 to 8% more efficient than the 2021 IECC. Another way of conveying the need for National Version 3.3 is this graph of modern efficiency codes, which kicked off with the 2006 IECC. When the more stringent 2009 IECC was released, we developed Energy Star National Version 3.0 in response to ensure at least 10% savings. The 2012 IECC advanced just 3 years later, triggering the development of Energy Star National Version 3.1. And then the code essentially plateaued after that until the release of the 2021 IECC, hence the creation of Energy Star National Version 3.2. And now with the advances in the 2024 IECC, we're proposing National Version 3.3. So that brings us to our primary goals for this new version, which are threefold. As we've already mentioned, the foremost goal is to continue to deliver at least 10% savings in homes that are certified to this new version relative to a home built to the 2024 IECC in all climate zones. Secondly, we want to evaluate whether to update the thermal backstop used in the latest current version. And finally, we wanted to evaluate whether to advance the infiltration backstop that we've separately proposed as part of revision 14. So let's walk through these one by one. And we'll start with the primary goal of delivering at least 10% savings. Now, in our national program versions, we use what we call the Energy Star ERI target, which is specific to each home to ensure that we achieve 10% savings. Energy rating software automatically determines this target for each home. And so let me briefly walk through how this is defined and used to help you understand how our proposal for version 3.3 was developed. Once a home pursuing certification is entered into rating software, the software automatically creates what we call a target home with the same key architectural features like foundation type, conditioned floor area, number of stories and orientation, as well as the same geographic location and fuel type. Next, the rating software applies what we call the Energy Star reference design to this target home. The Energy Star reference design is a prescriptive set of efficiency measures covering the house from top to bottom. So insulation levels, infiltration, duct location, equipment appliance efficiency, the whole shebang. Step 3, the rating software calculates the Energy Star ERI target, which is the ERI that results from the target home configured with that Energy Star reference design set of measures. And once the ERI target has been calculated, builders then select efficiency measures that meet or beat that ERI target. So for example, let's say that you model a home you want to certify and the software calculates that the Energy Star ERI target for that particular home is a 49. You then have to select efficiency measures that meet or beat 49 for that particular home. So none of the Energy Star reference design measures are mandatory for hitting the target, but if they're not used, then other measures have to be selected to compensate. So to ensure that we continue to deliver at least 10% savings for homes certified using this new version, we created a new, more efficient Energy Star reference design. This was developed by modeling the house parameters that are shown in this table in 128 different cities, resulting in more than 1,000 home configurations. These home configurations and the cities selected were consistent with DOE's methodology for evaluating residential codes. For these 1,000 plus home configurations, we had to apply efficiency measures. So for the baseline, we aligned the efficiency measures with the 2024 IECC prescriptive path. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the prescriptive path requires the selection of 2 additional efficiency measures. And so for our analysis, we selected measures in each climate zone that we believe builders would be likely to select, such as efficient water heaters, demand responsive thermostats, and for homes in the north, locating at least 80% of ducts in conditioned space. So those got us to the 10 points that were required just to define the baseline code-compliant home. For the new Energy Star reference design we developed for the National Version 3.3 proposal, we of course needed even better efficiency measures. So we began by using the prescriptive measures in the 2024 IECC, and then we evaluated the efficiency of various Energy Star products for possible inclusion in the reference design, such as windows, HVAC equipment, water heaters, and appliances. This was an iterative process. We modeled sets of measures until we were able to achieve at least 10% savings in all climate zones. And once we reached that goal, we then refined the specifications for consistency. So just for example, we wanted to ensure that the windows that we specified and the reference design did not change just based on whether electric or gas heating was used. So with that, let me show you what the proposed National Version 3.3 Energy Star design, reference design looks like. We'll start with the enclosure components. And in these tables, I thought it might be helpful to show you which measures are more stringent than the version 3.2 Energy Star reference design, and the few measures that are less stringent, since many partners have been developing intuition around that version. So Energy Star reference design for version 3.3 begins with insulation levels that are aligned with the 2024 IECC prescriptive path, achieving grade 1 installation, meaning all of that insulation is properly installed. These insulation levels are paired with windows and doors that generally meet the latest Energy Star specifications for this product type. We know that window manufacturers are continuing to ramp up production to meet the latest Energy Star window requirements, particularly in the north, and so we're a little bit more lenient there. But regardless, the windows have been upgraded in the version 3.3 Energy Star references across the board compared to version 3.2. For the infiltration, we've advanced to 2.5 ACH 50 in the very coldest climates, just as the 2024 IECC has done. And similarly, we've aligned with the vent fan efficiency in the latest code, including the use of HRVs and ERVs in the 3 coldest climate zones. Now let's take a look at the non-enclosure measures. For homes with a gas furnace and an air conditioner, we've advanced the furnace efficiency in climate zones 3 and 4. For homes with electric heat pumps, we've improved the heating efficiency in climate zones 5 through 8 from 9.2 to 9.5. And for HVAC installation, we've improved the airflow to grade 1 while keeping the other grades for watt draw and refrigerant charge the same. For water heating, we've improved the gas efficiency to Energy Star products levels from 0.9 to 0.95, and in just climate zone 4C, a relatively mild climate along the coast, we advanced heat pump water heater efficiency to 3.3 UEF, and we paired that with low flow showers and bathroom faucets. All of the other features shown in white here are identical to the version 3.2 Energy Star reference design. So overall, I'd characterize these as relatively incremental improvements using off-the-shelf technologies with larger improvements in colder climates. So how does this new Energy Star reference design perform? Well, it delivers on our primary goal of achieving at least 10% savings in all climate zones for both electric and gas homes. This table shows the weighted savings for all 1,000 plus simulations broken out by climate zone and by fuel type. Nationally, we estimate that the proposed Energy Star reference design saves 16% relative to the 2024 IECC. It's worth pointing out this reference design is a little bit future-proofed as well, as we anticipate that the savings will actually decrease over time due to new federal efficiency standards for furnaces and water heaters. Those standards have been finalized, but they're not going into effect until a little later, 2028 and 2029. And that might sound like a ways off, but at most it's going to be 2 years after most partners begin using this new version. In addition to meeting our savings target, we found that the new version is cost-effective, meaning a positive net cash flow. We estimated that the incremental costs of the proposed new version relative to the 2024 ICC for one electric and one gas home in each climate zone. We then converted that cost into a monthly mortgage upgrade cost and then subtracted the monthly purchased energy or utility savings, and that gave us the net cash flow, which was positive in all locations. And finally, we analyzed the ERI values resulting from this new proposed Energy Star reference design. Among the simulations completed, we found that the Energy Star ERI target was between 45 and 50 for about 70% of the homes, so the vast majority. And just for context, if you expand that by 1 point to 45 to 51, nearly 80% of homes fell within that range. Now, this is based on initial modeling, and the final range is going to vary depending on the software program. But the shorthand that we generally have used for National Version 3.2 of the program is that the Energy Star ERI target is about 45 to 55 for most homes. So the proposal for National Version 3.3 is essentially tightening that up to a 5-point range for most homes. Okay, so let's move on to our second goal, which was to evaluate the thermal backstop associated with this new version. As a refresher, the thermal backstop is the minimum amount of insulation and the minimum window performance that must be met for a home to be certified. More precisely, the thermal backstop can be defined by a single number, which is the area-weighted U factor for the enclosure. That means that regardless of the ERI value that the home achieves, it can never have an enclosure that's worse than these limits and be certified. But a home can trade off between ceiling, wall, and foundation insulation, windows, and doors to meet this thermal backstop. The thermal backstop of each of our national versions in our program have aligned with the prescriptive path of the IECC edition that it was developed in response to. So for example, version 3 was developed in response to the 2009 IECC, and the backstop was aligned with the prescriptive path of that edition of code. National version 3.2 was developed in response to the 2021 IECC, and the backstop was aligned with the prescriptive path of that edition of code as well. The only exception to this is National version 3.1, which was developed in response to the 2012 IECC, but for which the backstop was kept at the 2009 IECC. And the reason for this exception is that National version 3.1 was developed very shortly after the initial implementation of version 3.0, and version 3, as some of our longtime partners might well remember, was the greatest overhaul of our program requirements in the history of the program. So given the timing, our goal was to minimize the additional disruptions for partners, and so we retain the same backstop as version 3. In the 2024 IECC, the thermal enclosure has been refined somewhat relative to the 2021 IECC. In most climate zones, the ceiling insulation has decreased 1 increment, and just climate zones 4 and 5, the slab insulation depth has decreased by 1 foot. And in the colder climate zones, the window U factors have improved somewhat. Our best estimate is that the overall change in UA is plus or minus about 1.5% relative to the 2021 IECC. Given that the 2024 IECC is the latest consensus-based model code, and that our proposal for National version 3.3 is in response to this edition of code, we're following our prior precedent, and we're proposing to align the thermal backstop with the 2024 IECC prescriptive path. Finally, let's briefly discuss our third goal, evaluating the infiltration backstop. Separate from this new version that we're discussing today, the EPA is proposing to add what we call an infiltration backstop to all of its program requirements in the next revision due out later this year. By infiltration backstop, I mean a maximum air leakage rate that a home must not exceed in order to be certified. So we've separately proposed adding an infiltration backstop of 4.5 ACH50 for National version 3.1 and a more stringent backstop of 4 ACH50 for National version 3.2. We've also previously proposed an alternative limit for dwellings that are equal to or smaller than 1,500 square feet, townhouses of any size, and attached dwelling units of any size. For those, the limit would be based on a different metric, 0.3 CFM50 per square foot of dwelling unit enclosure area. And we think this is an important advance for the program, this idea of an infiltration backstop, on top of our existing mandatory air sealing requirements, because reduced infiltration improves efficiency, comfort, and indoor air quality. So we really want to ensure that it's locked in for every certified home. Okay, so that's some context. With this new version we're discussing today, we're proposing to advance that infiltration backstop again to 3.5 ACH50. That means that any home certified to this new version must not have a leakage rate above this limit. Note that the alternative limit for small dwellings, townhouses, and attached dwelling units would remain unchanged. And we think that this limit is achievable. In fact, 55% of all Energy Star homes certified last year in 2023 already met this proposed limit, with more than 80% of homes meeting this limit in most climate zones. By the time this new version is implemented, we're confident that any home pursuing certification could achieve this limit using standard off-the-shelf sealing techniques. Okay, so that wraps up the proposal for single-family new homes national version 3.3. With that, let me turn it over to Rebecca to discuss the multifamily new construction program.
Great, thanks, Dean. Now we're going to shift over to the multifamily sector. And I'm Rebecca Hudson, and I'm the technical manager of the multifamily new construction program, and hopefully my audio will remain good for this presentation as well. So just like for single family, we also have several different versions of our multifamily program requirements, and most states align with the single family new homes versions. So there are two national versions, national version 1.1, which like single family new homes 3.1 delivers at least 10% savings relative to the 2018 IECC. And that's the minimum eligible version for certification in most states, which are shown in the light blue. We also have national version 1.2, which just like single family version 3.2 delivers at least 10% savings relative to the 2021 IECC, and that will become the minimum eligible version for certification in states that adopt the 2021 IECC or an equally rigorous code. And you can see in the green striped states, those are the states that we have an implementation timeline defined for version 1.2. And finally, we also have regional program versions in a few locations. And just like for single family, I also want to emphasize that the minimum program version eligible for the tax credit can be more stringent than what we're showing here, the minimum version required just for certification. So with the release of the 2024 ICC for multifamily, we also analyzed version 1.2 as compared to the 2024 IECC. Since we did not achieve 10% savings in all climate zones, we also needed to develop national version 1.3. So once we needed a new version, we had the same goal at single family to deliver 10% savings relative to the 2024 IECC. Now, multifamily new construction has a thermal backstop too, so we also evaluated that. But for multifamily, we have always had a compartmentalization metric, but we're not adjusting it by version, so we do not specifically analyze that aspect. We just have two goals for multifamily. So let's start with achieving the 10% savings over the 2024 IECC. The multifamily new construction program has three different paths. And so for each version, we need to set performance targets for all three paths that ensure they all achieve 10% savings over code. The first path is the ERI path. And for this, the performance target is based on the Energy Star reference design being modeled in ERI software, just like how it was for the single family program. And just like for single family, the measures in that reference design are not mandatory for the dwelling units. But if they are not used, then you'll need to select other measures to meet the ERI target. Since the ERI model is a dwelling unit model and the program covers the whole building, for the common spaces, some of the reference design measures are required. The next path is the ASHRAE path. This is a whole building modeling path, and the performance target is based on modeling to ASHRAE 90.1 using Appendix G. The final path is the prescriptive path. There's no modeling for this path, but the measures in the reference design are required for the dwelling units and common spaces. So there's no trade-off available. Next, I'm going to talk through the development of the multifamily Energy Star reference design and the ERI target development, which will set the performance targets for the ERI and prescriptive paths. After that, I'll cover the ASHRAE path performance target. So just as for single family, to ensure that we continue to deliver at least 10% savings for buildings using the ERI path of this new version, we created a new, more efficient multifamily Energy Star reference design. And we also used modeling to develop the new reference design, but we used multifamily dwelling units. So we modeled the units of DOE's low-rise multifamily building prototype, which is an 18-unit low-rise building with the parameters shown in this table in 9 different cities, resulting in more than 300 dwelling unit configurations. And just like with single family, we also then set the baseline efficiency measures that we aligned the efficiency measures with the 2024 IECC prescriptive path. And as Dean noted earlier, the prescriptive path requires the selection of additional energy efficiency measures. For our analysis, we started with ducts in conditioned space for all of the units, and then we selected other measures in each climate zone that we believe developers would be likely to select, such as efficient water heaters or efficient HVAC equipment. For the new reference design we developed for National Version 1.3, we used the same process as single family. So again, this was an iterative process to achieve the 10% savings as well as consistency across the reference design. And we also wanted to align with single family new homes where appropriate. So with that, here is the new National Version 1.3 Energy Star reference design, starting with the enclosure components. And in these tables, I'm also highlighting which measures are more stringent than the version 1.2 Energy Star reference design, and the few measures that are less stringent with the different colors. This whole table is basically the same as a single-family new homes reference design. That said, the R values shown are based on a wood frame building with an attic, so the insulation required for other building types would be different. For multifamily new construction, we also have a separate line for mass floor insulation, which is based on the 2024 IECC commercial chapter values. And the other difference is in the infiltration. For multifamily, we use a compartmentalization metric rather than ACH50, so we advanced to 0.27 CFM50 per square foot in alignment with the 2024 IECC. And the buildings using the prescriptive path will need to meet this infiltration limit for each unit. So now let's take a look at the non-enclosure measures. All of the heating, cooling, and appliances are all aligned with the single-family reference design. The only differences with single-family are in the water heating. For multifamily new construction, we needed a slightly higher heat pump water heater efficiency with 2.5 UEF as compared to single-family in most of the climate zones. Overall, this is a jump from version 1.2. So we had a 1.49 UEF for that program. The final difference with single family is that for multifamily new construction, the reference design continues to have low flow water fixtures as it has in the previous versions. Otherwise, the tables are the same. So not all of the HVAC and water heating systems are included in the reference design. In alignment with these improvements, we're also updating the requirements on the larger water heaters and other multifamily HVAC equipment that are located in the Rater field checklist items. So for the large water heaters in the prescriptive path, electric water heaters serving dwelling units need to be at least 3 COP. For other fuels, they will need to be at least 95% thermal efficiency. And in the ERI path, the non-electric water heaters in the common spaces that are not serving laundry rooms also need to be that same 95% thermal efficiency. On the heating and cooling equipment, the heating efficiency for PTAX was increased for climate zone 4 to match what was required in cold climates in version 1.2. The COP for large heat pumps is also increased, as well as the thermal efficiency for boilers in climate zone 3 and 4. So now that we've covered the reference design and changes to the commercial equipment, let's see how everything modeled out for a goal of 10% savings. So this table shows the results for each of the low-rise buildings modeled. Note that except for the ERI, which is an average for the building units, the costs and savings are all total for the 18-unit buildings. So in all of the different 9 climate zones, we were able to achieve at least 10% savings for both electric and gas buildings. And this column shows the average savings across the building. It was also cost effective, and the net cash flow in this far right column is positive for all of the multifamily buildings as well. And this was calculated similar to Dean's explanation before. Now, when looking at the ERI scores, the averages for each building are summarized here. This is a range. The range for all of the units is a little bigger than for single family. So 80% were between 40 and 50. And this contrasts with about 45 to 55 for most dwelling units certified under version 1.2. However, most of those are really clustered at the center of that range, with nearly 50% of the units getting 44, 45, or 46. And as you can see by the averages from the building, most of those are 44, 45, or 46. So based on our initial modeling, that's what we see, but we know that the final range could vary by software. And also, we also know that there's a lot of different multifamily building types and units, and so the range could be much bigger just depending on what type of unit you have. So now that we had the reference design set, the proposed ERI path and prescriptive path performance targets are complete. So I want to look at the ASHRAE path. So the ASHRAE path is based on whole building modeling using Appendix G from ASHRAE 90.1. ASHRAE 90.1 can be used to meet the commercial chapter of the IECC, where the year of the relevant ASHRAE is about 2 years before the IECC year. So with the variation between the IECC residential chapter and 90.1 in different climate zones and differences in modeling, we've historically set the target to 15% savings over the relevant ASHRAE 90.1. So for version 1.1, the savings was set to 15% over the state commercial code, but we've proposed consolidating that to just 15% over ASHRAE 90.1 2016 in the next revision, as shown here in the table. For version 1.2, the target is 15% over 90.1 2019, and we're proposing to continue the precedent for version 1.3 to have the target as 15% over 90.1 2022. So there are a few different options for showing the 15% savings. Under the ASHRAE modeling, you can use either energy cost or source energy savings. And to document the savings, you'll need to enter your modeling results into the new DOE compliance form, and then export those results into the Energy Star Zero Energy Ready companion tool to see whether you have met the performance targets. We will post the DOE compliance form and a draft of the companion tool to the stakeholder feedback page so that you can see how your projects would do relative to the targets. The companion tool also has the fuel neutral approach included that we proposed over the summer to be added to the next revision. So in addition, we also have an alternative for buildings that are getting FEOS certified. We're proposing for version 1.3 a target of FEOS in the FIS Core 2021 source energy requirement. So that wraps up the ASHRAE path performance target. And now we can move on to our second goal, which was to look at the thermal backstop. For this, the same analysis Dean noted for the single family applies to multifamily as well. So we're also proposing for version 1.3 to align with the 2024 IECC prescriptive path. For multifamily new construction, the backstop will be based on the residential and commercial chapters, just like it is in the current version. So that wraps up the proposal for multifamily new construction national version 1.3, and I'm going to pass things back to Dean to summarize things.
Okay, and hopefully you can hear me again. So to wrap up today's webinar, I want to summarize the proposals and explain how the stakeholder feedback period will work. Our proposals today for the single-family new homes and multifamily new construction programs are a response to the recently completed 2024 IECC. For the single-family new homes program, the proposed national version 3.3 program requirements will do three things. First, it will define an Energy Star ERI target of about 45 to 50 for most homes, in contrast to about 45 to 55 for national version 3.2. It will align the thermal backstop with the 2024 IECC prescriptive path, following our general precedent. And third, it will advance the infiltration backstop to 3.5 ACH 50, with the alternative metric for small homes and attached homes remaining. For the multifamily new construction program, the proposed national version 1.3 program requirements will first define new performance targets. For the ERI path, an Energy Star ERI target of about 40 to 50 will be for most dwelling units. For the prescriptive path, the Energy Star reference design specifications will be used. And for the ASHRAE path, a target of 15% savings over 90.1 2022 is proposed. Secondly, like the single-family new homes program, national version 1.3 will align with the thermal backstop. Will align the thermal backstop with the 2024 IECC prescriptive path. Now let's discuss how this new version is intended to be used. In the case of the single-family new homes program, let's first discuss homes that are pursuing certification only. That is, homes that are not pursuing the Section 45L tax credit. First off, National Version 3.3 will only be required in states that adopt the 2024 IACC or an equally stringent code. Second, the earliest potential implementation date is for homes permitted on or after January 1st of 2027. Finally, we'll define these implementation dates on a state-by-state basis based on code adoption. So you'll hear each time a state advances to version 3.3, and let me run through two examples. Let's say that state A adopts and implements the 2024 IACC on January 1st of 2025. National version 3.3 would be required for certification in that state, beginning with permits on January 1st of 2027. Why not 2026? It's because January 2027 is the earliest that we'll implement this new version in any state. Let's do another example. Let's say that state B adopts and implements the 2024 IACC on January 1st of 2028. National version 3.3 would be required for certification in that state for permits beginning about 1 year later on January 1st of 2029. So you can see that the rollout of version 3.3 for certification purposes will be a gradual state-specific process. Now let's talk about homes that are pursuing the Section 45L tax credit. If our National version 3.3 proposal is finalized by the end of the year as proposed, then version 3.3 will be required in all states to earn the tax credit for homes that are acquired on or after January 1st, 2027. That's not a timeline that's defined by us. It's actually dictated by the timetable established in the legislation. The only exception to this would be states with regional program requirements, so California and Hawaii. Now, I want to emphasize two important points. The first is to remember that the minimum program version eligible for the tax credit can be more stringent than the version required for certification. So while version 3.3 may be required to earn the tax credit, in many states, a lesser version like 3.2 or even 3.1 will still be eligible just for certification. The second point to remember is that newer versions of the Energy Star program requirements can be used to satisfy the minimum tax credit requirements. For example, a home certified to National version 3.3 satisfies the National version 3.2 minimum eligible version requirement that's effective in 2025. Okay, now let's touch on the multifamily new construction program. Largely, the guidance is identical. For buildings that are pursuing certification only, so not pursuing the tax credit, National version 1.3 will only be required in states that adopt the 2024 IACC or equivalent. The one difference from the single-family new homes program is that the earliest potential implementation date of this new version is for buildings permitted on or after January 1st, 2028, which is 1 year later than for single-family new homes. Now, for buildings pursuing the tax credit, if National version 1.3 is finalized by the end of the year as proposed, then version 1.3 will be required in all states with national program requirements for dwelling units acquired on or after January 1st, 2028. Again, that's 1 year later than single-family new homes, and it's as defined and prescribed by the legislation. Before finalizing these proposals, we're holding a 4-week stakeholder feedback period. It kicks off today, October 24th, and it runs through November 21st. You can visit the link that's shown here to view this webinar in the stakeholder feedback form. Using that feedback form, you can submit comments to us at Energy Star Homes at energystar.gov. And our current expectation is that we'll release the final program requirements in December. With that, let's open it up for questions.
All right, thank you, Dean. So we had a lot of questions come in. We've been answering a few of them directly to partners that have asked, but I'll go through and give you and Rebecca some questions to answer. So first one is, what software modeling tool was used to evaluate savings and determine ERIs for this, and specifically asking if Ecotrope was used.
For this, we actually used Energy Plus OSERI to do all the simulations. That particularly helped us in doing the volume of simulations that we needed. For those that don't know, that is a tool that is developed and maintained by NREL.
Well, thanks, Dean. Regarding the reference design and smart or responsive thermostats, I think they might be programmable would fall into that category. They're asking how this can be addressed for heat pumps that don't run or respond to third-party thermostats and just use kind of built-in controls.
So there's no mandatory requirement to use a programmable thermostat or a demand responsive thermostat either. For our Energy Star reference design, we've long had a programmable thermostat as part of the reference design. That really doesn't change for heat pumps. For a builder that feels that they can incorporate a basic programmable thermostat, which could be as simple as like a programmable schedule, they could still use a manual thermostat. They would just take a small ding on the Energy Star or on the ERI score, and they would compensate with that with something else. So generally, we haven't heard of many problems with that kind of level of control. We have heard some challenges with, say, variable speed heat pumps being controlled by a non-proprietary thermostat. And that's kind of a different issue that isn't really directly impacted by the proposal here.
Great, thanks, Dean. So the slide showed equipment efficiencies in SEER and HSPF, and we had a partner ask if these are going to be updated to SEER 2 and HSPF 2.
That's a good question. Some people, including software tools, still think in SEER and HSPF typically. There are some conversions available from ResNet to go from HSPF 2 and SEER 2 to SEER and HSPF, the older metrics. I think it's a good point. We'll make a note to include the newer metrics in the Energy Star reference design configuration.
Great, thanks, Dean. We had a partner asking if HVAC grading is mandatory for either version 3.2 or the proposed version 3.3.
So currently, in terms of HVAC requirements, we have two tracks, track A and track B. We're not proposing any changes specific to version 3.3 for that. Separately, we have a proposal out from the summer to essentially sunset track B and move everyone over to track A. We received lots of feedback from our stakeholders on that particular proposal, and we've been working through our response to that. So the general requirements around track A and track B will be settled separately as part of the revision process, independent of any specific version. So I think the key point to take away for version 3.3 proposal that we're discussing today is we wouldn't be changing that approach specific to version 3.3. And at least as of now, both track A and track B would be acceptable for certification purposes.
Great, thanks, Dean. All right, regarding the infiltration backstop, with kind of the core ACH 50 requirement and then the alternative for CFM 50 per square foot of enclosure area, we had a partner ask if there, I guess maybe if you could just clarify what types of buildings and units that alternative is applicable to, and sure, maybe why it's not applicable to all kind of single family detached homes.
Yeah, let me go back up to that proposal just so I can, sorry for all the extensive scrolling here. Might be easiest though if I just put it on the screen. Okay, so there are three classes of buildings that this alternative metric applies to. It's a dwelling that is 1,500 square feet or smaller in terms of conditioned floor area. It's all townhouses, and it's all attached dwelling units, which for single family new homes really just means typically a duplex, because generally we're talking about detached structures in single family new homes. So any of those particular structures could use this alternative metric of 0.3 CFM 50 per square foot of dwelling unit enclosure area. Generally speaking, the rationale there is that it can be a bit more challenging for those types of structures to achieve the same level of tightness as a detached home for various reasons. Either the ACH50 metric isn't scaling kind of in a linear way with the smaller structures, or the attached structures, you typically have some extra challenges with sealing the attached components like attached walls. So this alternative metric is sort of recognizing that. It's also aligning with the alternative infiltration metrics that are in the latest edition of code, the 2024 ICC. So we kind of wanted to mirror that and in support of that model code. The reason that we wouldn't apply that same metric to standard detached structures is that, if we were going to take that metric, for example, we would probably set a more stringent limit of CFM 50 per square foot of dwelling unit enclosure area for the standard regular size detached structures. So it'd be a different limit that you'd have to be more stringent. And I think in most cases, you would end up with 4.5, 4 or 3.5 ACH 50 being more generous or more lenient. So our sense was that like most people would probably use the ACH 50 metric, even if they were given a choice for a standard detached structure. So there wasn't a lot of value in adding that metric for the other structure types. So hopefully that helps explain and answer the question. If not, feel free to follow up with us after the webinar.
Great, thanks, Dean. So with that alternative, I guess a related question for Rebecca. With that alternative of 0.3 CFM per square feet, Rebecca, could you just describe the multifamily reference design, what that is, the 0.27 value?
Yes, so for version 1.3, we're proposing to use the 0.27 CFM 50 per square foot. It's been 0.3 for our previous versions, but the 2024 IECC adjusted that alternative to 0.27 for dwelling units, and so we're aligning with that in our reference design, which again means that for the ERI path, it's not mandatory, and if you have to make up for it if you don't meet it, but we still have prescriptively required for all dwelling units a 0.3 CFM compartmentalization metric as part of our radar field checklist, and that still holds. So for the reference design for version 1.3, we're proposing it to be 0.27 is what you're benchmarked against, and we still have our 0.3 infiltration backstop required for all dwelling units regardless.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Another question based on the reference design values. They're asking if electric water heaters are going to be required to be at a heat pump level.
So I think that might be for me, but for multifamily, our reference design, again, will have about a heat pump level efficiency, but if you don't include a heat pump for your water heater, then you need to make up for that. For multifamily, it can be challenging given the load that is water heating to be able to make up that difference with other efficiency features, but it isn't a requirement. It's just part of the reference design.
All right, thanks. Rebecca, regarding the ASHRAE path target, we had a partner ask if there's going to be an addition for Passive House Institute PHI certification, or is it just based on FIAS certification?
The alternative is just based on FIAS certification and specific to their source energy calculations.
Okay, great. So regarding the public comment period that happened earlier this year on revision proposals, we had a partner ask when there might be any changes to current program requirements based on those.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're hoping to publish the final revision late this year, possibly early next year, like January, so in the next few months. Typically, we provide 1-year transition period for new revisions, meaning that any partner can begin using it immediately upon publication, but you have to start using it for homes that are permitted 1 year later. So roughly speaking, January 1st, 2026. That's kind of our working expectation for this new revision as well.
Great, thanks, Dean. We did have several questions related to, I might not read any of them directly, but related to implementation and permit dates versus acquisition dates. So maybe it's helpful just for one more time to go over that and when each of those applies.
So for family new homes, we want to distinguish between homes that are pursuing just certification alone. So they want to put the label on the house. Maybe they're doing that for local utility incentives. Maybe they're doing that for corporate environmental goals. Maybe they're doing that for marketing reasons. So they're not pursuing the tax credit. They just want to put the label on the house like, you know, most builders have been doing the past 20, 25 years. Okay, so for that scenario, single family new homes national version 3.3 is only going to be required in states that adopt the 2024 IECC or an equally stringent code. So what we'll do at EPA is evaluate those state codes state by state as they're adopted. We'll see if they're as stringent as the 2024 IECC, and if they are, we'll flip the switch and say this state has to start using 3.3 just for certification purposes. The earliest that we would possibly set an implementation date to use version 3.3 in a state for certification is January 1st of 2027. So you won't see anything before that, and then you might see some first cluster of states with that implementation date, and then more states would probably move to 2024 ICC in the future, and 3.3 would expand for certification purposes. Okay, so that's for those that are just pursuing certification. If a builder wants the tax credit, then they're getting certified, but they also have to meet the requirements of the 45L tax credit, and that timeline is prescribed by the legislation that created this updated Section 45L tax credit. So it says that if we complete this process of defining version 3.3 by January 1st of 2025, then the clock starts ticking, and then homes that are acquired 2 years later on or after January 1st, 2027 would have to meet this latest version in order to earn the tax credit. So basically any home in any state except for California and Hawaii would have to meet version 3.3 if acquired on or after January 1st, 2027 to earn the tax credit, assuming we finalize the proposal as we've talked today. For multifamily new construction, the same basic logic applies. It's just that the date is 1 year later. So we'll evaluate states, state by state, that are adopting the 2024 ICC for multifamily. And if they adopt that, then the earliest that we would require version 1.3 to be used is buildings permitted on or after January 1st of 2028. And then states that subsequently adopt the code, we would set an implementation timeline, approximately 1 year later than implementation. For buildings that are pursuing the 45L tax credit, or really the dwelling units within those buildings, if we proceed with the proposal and finalize it by the end of the year, then any building that's acquired or dwelling units are acquired after January 1st, 2028 would be required to meet version 1.3. Again, that's based on the timetable established by the legislation. And if Rebecca or John want to add anything to that, feel free to hop on, say something about that.
Yeah, no, just this is John. Just to reiterate, Energy Star certification still tied to permit date, 45L requirements still tied to acquisition date, as it has been, no changes.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for probably one more question, and we've had a couple people ask this one. We've kind of addressed it, but maybe since a few more people have asked, we'll circle back to it. Regarding HVAC grading requirements, Dean, maybe you could just speak about the varying requirements between track A and track B, and what is required for track A for HVAC grading, and if anything on that is changing with version, the proposed version 3.3.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start off with the Energy Star reference design. So that's defining the Energy Star ERI target that you have to meet. The only change we've made there is that within the reference design that we're proposing for version 3.3, we have changed the airflow grade from 2 to 1. It's a little bit better. That means the ERI target is a little bit more stringent. Doesn't mean you have to use HVAC grading. Doesn't mean you have to hit grade 1 for the home to be certified. It's just setting a slightly more stringent target for homes to strive for certification. Separate from the Energy Star reference design, which defines that ERI target, we have our mandatory requirements that every home has to meet in order to be certified, covering the thermal enclosure, the HVAC system, the ventilation system, etc. And so for those mandatory requirements, we have 2 tracks. We have what we call track A, we have track B. Track A is based on HVAC grading. It's an assessment by the rater of the HVAC system, and basically to assess whether it's properly installed. And then we have track B, in which a credentialed HVAC contractor installs the system. They do the commissioning assessment, they fill out a checklist, and they take care of that portion instead. With version 3.3, we're not proposing any changes to the track A or track B approach. What's a little bit in flux right now is that we have a separate proposal that would affect all the versions, version 3.1, version 3.2, version 3.3 if we finalize it. And that would say to sunset track B, move everyone over to track A for certification. That is a proposal we put out over the summer. We received a lot of feedback on that from partners, which we're currently processing, and we're figuring out whether to move forward with that proposal or to stick with the current approach of having both track A and track B. So I can understand why we've gotten a few questions about that, but the key thing to take away with this presentation is version 3.3 in and of itself is not really changing any of that. It's just setting a slightly more stringent ERI target based on grade 1 versus grade 2 for airflow.
Great, thanks Ian, hope that clears it up. So I believe that's all the time we have for questions today. So thank you, Dean and Rebecca, very much for the presentation.
Thank you again, everyone.
Great.
Oh.
Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, everyone who attended the webinar today. As a reminder, a copy of the slides will be sent out shortly to all registrants of today's webinar, along with a link where you'll be able to watch a recording of today's presentation. If you have any questions about today's presentation or the comment period, please send an email to EnergyStarHomes@energystar.gov, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.